The Lofoten Islands is one of Norway's most amazing destinations, from charming seaside towns to jaw-dropping hikes and activities, and some great food and culture. It's a destination worth exploring. We are here in the Lofoten Islands in Norway, and this has been a 7-day trip that we have planned for quite a long time. And it's been absolutely amazing. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I learned as a first-time visitor. I am in no way an expert on this country or this location, but I do know that there were things that I wish I'd have known. There are some things I've learned while I was here that I think for first-time visitors would be very helpful. And we've had an amazing trip. We're here for the midnight sun. It's mid-July. We've been lucky enough to see the midnight sun one evening. Rest of the time the weather's been a little bit iffy, but it changes really quickly, and that's probably the first thing I'd want you to know is plan for any kind of weather when you're coming here. So hopefully I can help you plan your amazing trip to Norway and the Lofoten Islands. I will cover the most important things for first-time visitors to know: how to get there, the best ways to get around, where to base your stay, top things to do, and tons of tips for planning your trip. The first thing you'll need to do is figure out how to get there. Norway is an enormous and spread out country. There are 3 main options. You can either drive, take a ferry, or fly. There are advantages and drawbacks to all of these options. Driving is a great option if you have the time and like to spend at least 24 hours in a car from either Bergen or Oslo. Ferries such as Havila are another great way to reach the Lofotens. From Bergen, it will take about 4 days though. But what I recommend if you don't have unlimited time is flying. During my planning process, picking which airline was the first hurdle. Your main options are SAS and Widerøe. I went with Widerøe, and it was a great experience. I think they are your best option for most flights within Norway. They fly everywhere and in almost any conditions. They were on time and flights were seamless. When booking our flights, I noticed some very tight connections on Widerøe. We had a 30-minute connection in Ballstad, and I was a little worried, but we were early on almost all of our flights, and we made every connection. Renting a car is the best way to get around. The Lofoten Islands are very spread out, and public transport, although available, is not frequent enough to make it feasible for most tourists. Rentals are expensive, but they are worth every penny. So the first decision you'll have to make when picking a vehicle for rental is whether you want to go with a traditional gas engine or an electric vehicle. We chose doing a traditional gas vehicle because we don't have an e-vehicle at home, so we decided we didn't want to learn about charging and apps and different things while we were traveling. But as we traveled around the Lofoten Islands and all of Norway, we saw tons of charging stations. They were at hotels and even at trailheads. So if you're considering it, and you're worried that there isn't a good charging infrastructure, don't worry about it because they are everywhere. So during all of my research, I kept coming across a common theme in some of the online groups that I belong to or in things I was reading, is that U.S. credit cards will not work in Norway without a PIN at unmanned gas stations. Actually, I found this not to be a problem at all. Most of the time we were able to find a manned gas station and go inside to the store and pay for the gas. But at other times we did use unmanned and we just used Apple Pay and we had no issue whatsoever. Parking was one of the trickier things all throughout Norway and in the Lofoten Islands. At many of the major trailheads in different towns and villages you'd visit, there was paid parking. And if you download the Easy Park app onto your phone, it makes everything seamless. You can pay for all of your parking there. You won't have any surprises and fines when you return your car to your rental company, and it makes everything pretty seamless. The other option at some of the smaller parking lots that we ran into was you would use an app called Vipps, which only people who are living in Norway and have a Norwegian phone number can use this banking app. There were other options to pay at some of these smaller places on PayPal, bank transfers, and I even saw a few where you could deposit cash with your vehicle registration information on the envelope. But parking is a bit of an issue, but if you do the Easy Park app, you will be in a great situation for most parking spaces. A tip on the Easy Park app is to make sure you enter your registration or your license plate number for your vehicle without any spaces. Otherwise, if you put the space in between the letters and the numbers, it will not take it and you will think you can't register your vehicle. But we had no problem registering all of our rental vehicles in that app. As you can see from that map, the Lofoten Islands are a large and spread out area. From the top to the southern tip, it can take 2.5 to 3 hours, and that doesn't include any stops you might make along the way. So deciding where you're going to base your stay is critical. And I think you have two main options. One is to either stay one spot and travel out, which if you do that, I would suggest mid-islands around Leknes as a great base point. So you only have about an hour and a half to Reine. And if you go north, you can do about an hour and a half to Henningsvær. Otherwise, you could pick either 2 or 3 locations throughout the islands to stay over the course of the time. I would then pick staying somewhere in the south, in the middle, and then in the north. And that will give you a closer transit to all the things you want to do while you're there. We chose to actually stay in 2 different locations. We started our trip in Ballstad at the Hedvika Lodge, which was a wonderful property, very well run, excellent staff, great food, and lots of guided activities. We then moved up to Henningsvær, which is a charming town in the northern part of the Lofoten Islands. There was a lot to do, but it was a bit more crowded in that area. So other options for accommodations throughout the Lofoten Islands are small inns, Airbnbs, and even camping. You're actually going to find a lot of tents, RVs, and camper vans all throughout the Lofoten Islands. Norway has a law called the right to roam, which means that you can basically camp just about anywhere. It's becoming a bit of a problem from what I understand in the Lofoten Islands because you will find camper vans and RVs pulled off on almost every single pull-out that you see, making it a little difficult for other people to enjoy some of those locations. But if you're looking for a more cost-effective way to explore the Lofoten Islands, camping is a great option. So now for the activities you want to do when you're visiting the Lofoten Islands. The number one activity anywhere in the Lofoten Islands is hiking. And I will tell you up front that hiking in the Lofoten Islands is strenuous and a little bit more technically challenging than a lot of other places I visited. When I was researching this, I basically saw videos online of 20 or 30 somethings scrambling to the top of every mountain. I rarely saw an old guy like myself or someone that's afraid of heights doing these hikes. So what I want to give you is a new perspective on some hikes that you can do that aren't quite as challenging and also allay your fears of some of the hikes that you might think are a little too difficult for you. One of my favorite hikes or walks was the journey from Widerøe Beach to Hockland Beach. This shares a trailhead with the Man In Hike, which is one of the more doable summit hikes, but due to weather and timing, we never did actually make that hike. The beach walk is flat and very scenic. It's also a good place to ride a bike if you have one. The Reine and Kalvika Beach Trail is another really popular hike. We did parts of this hike, but due to some trail closures from Reine down to Kalvika Beach, we never made it to the beach. There's lots of ample parking in the area. It's a small little farm, and you pay with a credit card to park there. So the big hike that everyone will want to do when they're visiting the Lofoten Islands is Reine. And the question is, does this hike live up to all the hype? And I really think it does. If you have good weather, you'll get an amazing view from the top, and it is a doable hike. It's hard to climb 1,978 steps to the top, but if you take your time, it is very doable. The climb down is actually more difficult since it uses a whole different set of muscles and your legs are really tired from the climb up. As a person with the fear of heights, I didn't have any issues on this hike. The most difficult part was dealing with the crowds. So I think if you go earlier in the day or later in the afternoon, you will find it a little bit more manageable. But if you can, and you're physically able to, doing this hike is well worth it. So one of the other places I would suggest hiking is in Gimsøy Island. This is the less traveled to portion of the Lofoten Islands, and there were some amazing hikes there. I so wanted to finish the one, but the weather changed completely at about 3/4 of the way to the summit. So we had to turn around and go back. It started with a light drizzle that morning. We thought we'd be fine. The visibility got worse and worse as we climbed until eventually we decided we couldn't go any further. And even if we did, we wouldn't be able to see anything. So that is a big lesson on hiking in the Lofoten Islands. Be prepared for anything. You may start out on a sunny conditions and end up with a monsoon later in the hike. So take along the proper equipment and be prepared. One of the other things you want to be certain to do while visiting is to do any activity to get you out on the water. It gives you a whole different perspective on the Lofoten Islands. We did a great kayaking tour through Hedvika Lodge where we were staying, and it gave us a whole new perspective on it. You can also find tours in all the different towns around the islands for kayaking. But you can find other boat tours that don't require quite as much exertion. But getting out on the water gives you a whole different vantage point. And then one of the other great things to do while you're visiting the Lofoten Islands is to just wander. Get in your car and drive from small village to small village, exploring, stopping in shops, just seeing what the islands have to offer. One of my favorite small towns and villages was Nusfjord, which was a small, really well-preserved fishing village, had great food, restaurant options, and just a really quaint and beautiful environment. I also really enjoyed Henningsvær. There's a lot going on there. Great restaurants, things to explore, and different activities within that area. So now for the weather. That's the big question everyone has when planning a trip to Norway, and more specifically to the Lofoten Islands. And the thing I can tell you is that it is constantly changing. In the 7 days that we were there, we never had one full day of sunshine, nor did we have one full day of rain. So we'd start a day a little dreary and end up with a beautiful afternoon, or vice versa. So you'll probably have a rainy day or two while you're visiting the Lofoten Islands. And when that happens, you can still get out and hike and do adventures and still enjoy them. But some of them will actually be so rainy or dreary that you really want to do something indoors. So here are a few suggestions of what you can explore.
Making a griddle.
Some of our favorite things to do on a rainy day, we're visiting a glass-blowing shop and cafe called Ballstad. You can watch the amazing artisans make hand-blown glass and shop for great souvenirs. They also have a wonderful cafe with my second favorite cinnamon roll of the trip. Another stop on a rainy day that surprised us was the Viking Museum. On our ride into Lofoten on the first day, we passed it and I joked that we were going to go to the museum, which is not something that we would normally do. But on a rainy day, we drove past and decided to pull into the parking lot. It seemed like a good way to pass some time. It was extremely interesting, and the longhouse and the outdoor activities are something I would recommend you stop and visit, even on a sunny day. Another thing you want to do when you're visiting the Lofoten Islands, whether it's a rainy day or a sunny day, is to check out all the amazing cafes and eat some of the amazing cinnamon rolls all around the Lofoten Islands. My top two choices were the cafe at Ballstad, which had a really good cinnamon roll. It was not too sweet, but it was really flavorful. But my favorite was the cinnamon roll that I had at Ballstad Arctic Cafe. This one was so good. It was sweet, it had a crunchy sugar on the top of it, and I could eat them over and over again. And if you go there, don't pass up the hot chocolate. It was really good and beautiful. I like this one a lot. So now for my top 3 tips on how to plan a successful trip to the Lofoten Islands. The first one is to make sure you book early. At least 6 months in advance, book your flights, your car, and your hotel. Make them refundable so that you can make changes if you need to or if you find better prices, but you'll know you have options. The closer we got to our departure date, the more expensive and the more limited the options were on both cars and accommodations. My number 2 tip is to not rush your time at the Lofoten Islands. If you do not have at least 5 days to dedicate to exploring, you are going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money getting there, and you're not going to get the full experience. So don't rush it. And my 3rd tip would be to set a budget. The Lofoten Islands and all of Norway is extremely expensive to visit. We found that food and car rentals were shockingly expensive. So if you set a budget, you'll know what to expect. If you're finding this video helpful in planning your trip to the Lofoten Islands, please like and subscribe and visit forkandwonder.com. So now for some of the things that I found most surprising on my first time visit to the Lofoten Islands. My first one is parking. Parking was a little bit limited in different areas and a little bit challenging at times. But if you get yourself the Easy Park app, it'll make your life a lot easier. The other thing that I was shocked at is how big the Lofoten Islands are. From one end to the other, it can take 2.5 to 3 hours to drive. I also was surprised at how much industry as well as farming there was located all around it. I thought it was going to be a little bit more condensed and a little bit more like a almost like a national park, but it really isn't. It's a thriving, living community, and it is very spread out. Right. Another surprise for me was how easy driving was. I had expected a lot more traffic. We were visiting in the early part of July, and I had heard that it can be a little congested. We didn't have any issues with that. But I also found the roads to be in great condition. They're very wide in comparison to other parts of Norway that we visited. And it was just easy to get around the Lofoten Islands. Another thing that really surprised me on our visit was how crowded certain things were. Especially when it came to the camper vans, RVs, backpackers, and tents. Everywhere we would go, we would see a camper van parked. And sometimes it would limit where you could pull off because there were so many people camping there. So that did surprise me. And the right to roam law, from what I understand, is kind of getting a little controversial and leading to a little bit over tourism in the Lofoten Islands. So I was just surprised at how many people were camping, backpacking, and RVing. So another thing we were really surprised about was the cost of everything. We had heard that Norway and the Lofoten Islands are very expensive. We were prepared for the cost of hotels, car rentals, flights. But one thing that really surprised us was the expense of food and drink. So make sure you're budgeting for those items because it is more expensive than most of the other places we have visited. Everything that I had seen prior to my trip to the Lofoten Islands was primarily shot with drone video. And it is a little bit deceiving because that is not what you're going to see when you are on the ground. So I urge you to look for videos and information that are not all taken from an aerial view because it's going to give you an unrealistic expectation of what the Lofoten Islands look like. It's a beautiful place, but you are down in it and experiencing it. The other thing about the drones is they do get to be a little bit of a nuisance in certain tourist areas, especially very popular hikes. So I suggest put the drone down and experience the location in person. So we went to the Lofoten Islands for the midnight sun. It was mid-July, and we had 24-hour daylight the entire time we were visiting. I thought I would be prepared for this, but I wasn't. It really messed with my sleep habits. It also creates a sense of you needing to do something at all hours of the day because it feels like it's the middle of the afternoon. Even with blackout shades and eye masks, we really found it hard to sleep. So that surprised me, and I think it would probably be equally as difficult and shocking in the winter. It just might be an opposite effect. I hope that me sharing my adventures as a first-time visitor to the Lofoten Islands is helping you plan your visit. If you need more information, check out my blog at forkandwonder.com.